You know, the thing that really ticks me off is, you know, how, Hitler came to power in the, late 1920s, early 1930s, right? And, we kind of knew he was a major threat. We kind of knew he was going to do the things he was going to do ahead of time. We might not have known everything he was going to do, including the Holocaust and things like that, but we sort of knew that this guy was a madman. And so, how did we know that this, you know, why did we let him stay in power if we knew he was going to be a madman? If we had the responsibilities of policing the world, if anybody did, why did we let this guy stay in power? Well, let me just give you a brief history on it before I talk about my topic. That is to say that, the globalists, they wanted a new world order. In the beginning, they didn't know how to do it. In the late 1920s, they've been wanting this for thousands and thousands of years, this new world order that they still want today. So they said, okay, Hitler, we'll let you stay in power through the Allied powers. We'll let you do whatever. And then one thing led to another. And then he took over the certain countries through peace, and then invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, which started the Second World War. Well, it wasn't until right around mid-1942, when Midway was going on, when the globalists realized, yes, we want a new world order, but not the kind where everything's got to be Hitler's way all the time. So that what they did was, this was back, I don't think this was in mid-1942, this was like mid-1941, because the invasion of Russia was on December, I think it was in spring of 1941. Anyways, or it was in December, one of those two areas, right? But it did occur in 1941, the German invasion of Russia, known as Operation Barbarossa, if you will. And that they sent spies and negotiators into Germany to convince Germany to pull it off, to divide itself so that they can intentionally lose, and long and behold, what happened afterwards? Well, we ended up with the United Nations, NATO, and 7 years later, here we are with NAFTA, right? World War II, as you know, wasn't just about defeating the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese. It was also about trying to defeat the globalists, but the globalists who had took over the Axis powers also had control over the Allied powers. But it wasn't until after the Second World War that the United Nations was created. And ever since then, the United States, which had joined the United Nations, had been involved in treasonous wars. Charles de Gaulle, who led the rebellion and led the French military who wanted to carry on the fight against the Germans after their country was taken over, realized at the end of World War II that when he later became president of France, realized that it wasn't a good idea for France to be part of the United Nations, and he withdrew. And it wasn't until after he died in the 70s when France later rejoined the United Nations, because they were later taken over again by the very same globalists who have taken over the United States and Great Britain and all of Western Europe. Well, they haven't completely taken over the United States yet, but they do have manipulative control over our Congress. And that I'm going to talk about on a later segment. But anyways, this brings up a very good topic that I want to talk about, and that is wars. It's not the same as foreign policy. Foreign policy is broader than that, but wars is a specific details based on war. Anyways, my name's Michael Long, and thank you for joining me today. Appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about wars because I feel that it's an important issue for the world to understand, especially for the United States' position in foreign policy. Now, we've been in the affairs of other countries, I'd say since World War I. We've been in our own affairs since before the Civil War, and we won our freedoms from Great Britain in in 1775, 1776. Of course, we haven't really, if we hadn't have forced the British off our mainland until the mid 1780s, but that's a different story. That's a side issue compared to what I'm going to talk about. The wars that the United States have been involved in since the end of World War II have either been have been confirmed through Congress, but it hasn't really been done through the way the Constitution says we have to do it, right? The president would just go to the Congress will authorize it, and then he'd run to the United Nations to get it confirmed, and then off to war we go. The Constitution says that we shall only be in the affairs of other countries, we should only be in war if we've been imminently attacked and or invaded, or we're in imminent danger or threatened. That's when the Congress is then supposed to declare war, which this president's supposed to sign. You're supposed to have a declaration of war before you go into war, and that hasn't been done since World War II. Okay, so in other words, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Persian Wars, the war in Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom, the war in Afghanistan. Okay, they've all been unconstitutional. Okay, so in other words, we didn't have the authority to be under the U.S. Constitution to be involved in any of these affairs. Now, if to deal with terrorism is the same way to deal with illegal immigration, there's a thing called the threat and reprisal. The last time it was under method, which is prescribed and used, was put into the U.S. Constitution the same year the Constitution was created for the United States, and one of those states, and the last time it was used was during the mid or early or late 1800s when we were dealing with the pirates off the African coast. And the first and final time it was used in the police action was during this early to mid 1970s, when to get us into the war against illegal immigration that we're currently in. So even the war against illegal immigration is a complete and legal and constitutional war. The war against illegal immigration does not violate the Constitution in any shape, matter, or form. Now, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the war on drugs, the Korean War in the 1950s, the Vietnam War in the 1960s, and so on and so forth, and almost all the wars that we have been involved in since the end of World War II have been unconstitutional, specifically because either we were not an imminent threat, we were not imminently threatened, attacked, and or invaded, or the Constitution just simply was not applied. And so you got to think about the circumstances, and not just the reason as to why we're in a war. Okay? So my name's Michael Long, and thank you for joining me, and I appreciate it.